that you guys are attacking us and making us look like we're crazy when we're just trying to save some fucking children pisses me off.
Over the past months, conspiracy groups have gained more international attention. But who are the people behind it? And what happens when someone you know or someone you're close to falls down the rabbit hole?
So my situation with QAnon is one, when it started happening, I saw a lot of college students, a lot of fellow students basically go down the rabbit hole. People that would be considered very, very liberal and left-leaning suddenly became hardcore, potentially violent conservatives. And I almost had an experience with that in the way of my brother. If it wasn't for certain things, my brother probably would have went full QAnon, as it were.
My mom, she got sucked in really early on. Like right as Pizzagate was taking off, which to me was pretty much the precursor to QAnon. It didn't really have a name yet. It was just kind of a lot of people on the internet saying really loony things.
Stories like this are more common than you might think. There are online support groups with over 100,000 members. But what are conspiracy theories? By definition, they are the belief that an organization or person is responsible for an unexplained event. COVID-19, the Trump presidency, the 2020 US elections, and the storming of Capitol Hill made the world more aware than ever about conspiracy theorists and their impact on individuals and political events.
I won't lie to you, I was ready to try and disconnect him from my life completely. You can't approach people that are living in a fantasy either. You can't approach people that are believing eyes.
I didn't really understand how, like, what part of it she was relating to, why she felt like whether she was serious or not. And then that just kind of created, this cycle of me getting upset about it and fighting and name calling each other. And, that got worse and worse over 4 years. And at certain points we were not speaking. And I don't know, it's just like when you hear your mom thinks, or anyone thinks that Hillary Clinton is keeping children in the basement of a pizza joint in Washington, D.C. Like, that's just, it's just like life is not as interesting as you think it is.
The thing with my brother is, one, he was a former drug addict, used to be popping a lot of pain pills, and that was a hard recovery for him. And he lost a lot of friends, so he, like a lot of other people from the millennial generation downward, they found this alt-right pipeline through podcasts, through men and women they thought were better than them. Some names include Sargon of Akkad, Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, Shoe on Head. And so he thought these men were better than him. And in my brother's mind, if they're better than me, they must know what they're talking about because they're better than me. When you're kicked down to the bottom of the barrel, you'll look for anything to explain your situation, no matter what it is.
It's like she thought she was some kind of figurehead or something, like gave her a sense of importance, and it was like attention that she wasn't getting elsewhere, and she felt important.
But what is it that draws people into conspiracy theories?
People tend to believe conspiracy theories for three psychological reasons. And the first reason is sort of like your epistemic motivation. So needing to understand the world around you, why things happen, how they happen. And when those explanations are very difficult to understand, having lots of heuristic conspiracy is sort of a belief where you can think, we kind of look for a simple explanation to understand something that we perhaps is too complex for us to understand. The second one is sort of existential motivations. So we need to feel safe, we need to feel secure. And when we don't feel that way, or we feel powerless in any way, we look for a reason to kind of grab back our power and think. So especially if you look at like coronavirus, this is this huge thing that has kind of hit everyone in the world at the same time. It's very distressing. So you would look for something to reduce that distress. And that's where conspiracy theories can come in. And then the third one is sort of our social motivation. So people tend to want to feel, have a positive self-image and a positive belief in their in-group. So when things happen, when big things like a pandemic happen, you often will look for a scapegoat. So people from another group, from an out group, say, well, it's their fault. So like China, it started there, therefore it must be their fault. So in the last year with the pandemic, we could actually say that all three of those motivations have kind of become like a melting pot. And what is worrying about that is that what's been found in the real-time data collection that's been happening is that when people sort of subscribe to those kind of beliefs, it does tend to lower their adherence to things like social distancing, hand washing, mask wearing. As you can see, like often in America, it's become quite a political thing. So so those are sort of some of it's a very broad subject, but that's kind of a little condensed version of why people might believe in conspiracies.
Is an increase, because at the end of the day, this is my personal theory, life is boring. And life is really boring, and so many people don't know how to accept their boring.
So when a big event happens, like when Princess Diana died, or 9/11 happened, it's this huge thing that happens. I mean, normally people can remember, if they were old enough, they can remember where they were when they heard the news, what they were doing, this kind of really, really vibrant memory of that event. And what we've also looked at is that the proportionality bias means that when something that huge happens in the world, we want there to be an equally huge explanation as to why it happened. So the idea that a princess just died in a normal car accident, that's just not a good enough explanation. There's got to be something bigger.
I would say after the insurrection, I really tried to be compassionate about it, because I just started feeling bad for her rather than angry at her, because it's sad. It's really just like a pathetic thing to watch this person like cling to desperately to something that, it's a US president. Like, you knew it was going to be over eventually. Like, the whole QAnon mantra is, basically an exact copy of the story of Christ, and like Donald Trump is Jesus. So that alone was like, oh wow, that's like really sad that this is like what her religion is. So the more I started thinking about, obviously she's doing this because she feels empty in some way or lost, and she doesn't know who she is. And I'm thinking of all the potential reasons for why she feels that way. It's my mom. So like I felt really sad for her.
Well, I don't know much about the movement other than I understand they like me very much, which I appreciate, but I don't know much about the movement.
So that's where that came in. And then, of course, there was this idea that the deep state or the CIA or all these secretive, shadowy figures were in the background trying to stop him from doing this. So which is where like the election fraud and the stop the steal and all of that kind of fed into. So even though he may not have overtly sort of given them his blessing, he was feeding into their narrative in a very clever, manipulative kind of way.
But how do you act and how do you approach the situation when someone you know is getting drawn into those movements?
If this has gotten to a point that it's so toxic and there's no hope of it ever being better, then the best thing you can do is just distance yourself and not get involved, because you can't, like with drugs, with any problem that happens to families or in relationships, you can't force someone to get well.
In the Western world, we need to have the conversation of, can we take everybody to a better place, or are we going to have to leave people behind?
I don't know if that's the right approach, because if people believe these things and if these conspiracy theories are helping their psychological discomfort, telling them that they are stupid or they are racist or they are whatever, perhaps you need to be a little bit more, reach across the divide a little bit, so to speak. So listen to what they have to say and then offer a different narrative without being too judgmental.
Some people have extreme opinions about how to deal with conspiracy theorists, especially if they have experienced the impact those groups can have firsthand.
If they don't want to pay their fair share, let the state fail. Let those people suffer. So those people, do they deserve to live in a society? I don't think they do.